So this is about how do we readjust ourselves to the emerging scenario of teaching and learning during this pandemic, and which is lingering, may go on till 2025. We don't know. Even the vaccine has arrived. So congratulations to all. At least the vaccine has started day for X today. But this has actually posed immense challenges for us. Immense challenges in terms of that how do you plan ourselves in terms of personalize the learning, which is going to be the centerpiece of the instructions. So we now say that the shift is to promote a remote-based hybrid instruction that has given us an opportunity to deepen our commitment to a very learner-centered approach and build the new strategies that will continue to be applied. So I would like to have a look at the first slide. And this first slide yeah. We have to. Yeah, just have to.
You can make F5, sir. That is easier to make the full screen.
Yeah. Are you getting the full screen now? Right. Okay. All right. We'll run through that. In this context, I primarily want to focus on a few elements: the open education resources and how it is supporting our teaching and learning in the current scenario. And it has quite a few components. If you look at the slide, and these components, I have given a quick rundown of these components. And let us try to deconstruct this entire slide into some meaningful discussions. So if you see, this is the first thing that I want to talk about is the right to education. Now, the right to education is, am I probably getting, something is blocking the view. Yeah. So in this right to education, we do have something called the access to the knowledge. And this access to the knowledge is what I call is based on underpinning the very fundamental right to the education. So that reflects in the international law, as we all know, that the Article 26 of the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights and the Article 13 and 14 actually suggest this right to education. It is an international covenant, the International Covenant on these right to educations, which was founded many years ago as a part of these United Nations declarations on the same. So which is we know as the International Covenant on the Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. So if you could run through the other elements, which is for all these, we do have these 5 R's, which I discuss as how do you able to not only about to create a content, but able to retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute this content. And that actually put us at a cross purpose with a lot of ways that this content is acquired and redistributed. One of the sources of acquiring the content, as you know, is through the open source. But the open source also is very dependent on something called Creative Commons. Now, the Creative Commons is a law which governs this the way we distribute this content, and and this distribution of this content would mean that quite a few things. One is, I would say, the way the Creative Commons is limiting the use of licensing this content, and there are multiple licenses that are available. So in a way that actually is putting a rein on the way this content is looked at. The second part is I also would like to discuss about there's a lot of open source movement which always want this content to be free, but content also there are arguments on the both sides why the content should be free and why the content should not be free. One is that when the content is free, it is put in the public domain, and hence for the creative purpose it can be used. You are creating a knowledge base, and through the process of these retentions, reusing, revising, remixing, and redistributions, we are able to add to this body of knowledge. So that's an extremely good argument about the way we look at the entire process of how this content is enhancing or contributing this process of the knowledge building. But the other side is how this production of the content is incentivized. If you are not looking at the source of how this is incentivized by the creators of the content, then that creates a problem. So there's two sides of this argument. So the Creative Commons probably looks at it a certain way, together with, if you look at the other proposition, which is the information wants to be free, that's a movement by the way, it's a global movement. We would see that it's actually sort of hanging on a balance. So in this positions, we have to sort of negotiate our positions through this. Okay. The other thing that I want to discuss is the access to content, how it concerns not only through the Creative Commons, but through concerns with the various copyright laws, a lot of regulatory requirements under which you have to locate this content. And in a particular way, this affect the knowledge and the places within which there is an, that is as a certain undercurrent of the way this content can be used for social need and for policy issues. So we finally probably could be able to sum up this by looking at these issues specifically, not in isolations, because these issues are very interconnected. It is almost like a spectrum. So when you look at the issues such as a patent law, which needs to be reformed in a particular way for a content purpose, or you are looking at the way a copyright law needs to be looked at, like the way the UK's your everything is the Statute of Anne, which is about 170 years old now. So in this way, when you're looking at all these issues, we must look them in totality so that we would be able to find that how these things are interconnected in terms of, so that we'd be able to derive certain right for more content to come into these open education resources. Okay. So from there, I would like you to have a look at the next slide, which is about the way we look at the online educations, open educations, and flexible learning. Now, for me, it's a kind of a triad. How do you sort of look at each other, and in a way that how these particular things really affects you. Now, let me just move this slide, please. Maybe something is blocking the view. Yeah. Yeah. Just a sec.
2 more minutes, please. Professor, 2 more minutes.
Yeah, sure. I try to sort of run through. Okay, all right. So if you see this, the way these two, the interfaces has too many elements. I don't know if I'm really reading those fine prints. I'm sorry, I should have made the font size a little bigger. But within this interface, you would see there are elements like the way you are archiving a particular content, the way you are working on your cost, the way there is a certain way this content is being reviewed, peer reviewed, or the way it has becoming made more time efficient, okay, or been made more time flexible. So these are some of the things that I wanted to really draw your attention to when you are looking at these interfaces. I'll just skip the next slide, but I would like to go to the peer e-tutoring. Now, this is something that when you're talking about the entire way the tutoring needs to be done, the best way is to put the students in control of the learning. And there are several studies which have found that once you make the student to take control of the learning, and also even to make them take turns in covering the role of a tutor, there is a substantial active participations in the online discussions compared to a very didactic one way of tutoring, or when the teacher is thinking about controlling the entire classroom. So but then you probably could argue that what would happen to the role of these the participants who take control of the learning, or learning in the sense that in teaching, who take turns in covering this role of tutor, following their
time off. Can you conclude, please? Yeah.
Following the sessions of the tutoring, they can be reduced to the role of a supportive, collaborative, and education style. Okay, now I would like to, there are a few more slides which I have to, and I'll conclude, by the way, and that probably now taking to a more student-centered, case-based, adaptive, intelligent e-tutoring. It means combining the artificial intelligence that has its own discourse, which I had to skip due to the paucity of the time, but I come to the end of it, is that when you're looking at the online tutoring or the online learning, there are quite a few flip sides to this story. Lot of the students come from broken families, and they do have come from a background of a very seriously emotionally distraught. So these social and emotional consequences need to be looked at. The second part is that the digital divide is actually is being further widened. So the gap is being widened due to the online teaching. And this has been explained in a theory which is called the attention inequality. The attention inequality is actually the way it is linked to the attention's inequalities coefficient. If that is something called this attention inequality is when I said that this attention